When does the third person camera drop for Resident Evil Village?
Yeah, I'm kind of I wanna play through it again, but I don't wanna play through it again until I have the third person camera.
But when?
Welcome to the podcast, guys. We're, talking about Final Fantasy?
Yeah, intergrade. You beat
Yeah,
it. You did the
I
do.
I did. 36 hours is what it took for me to beat Final Fantasy VII Intergrade. I know the speed runs are faster than that, but I still feel like I blew through it for my first time through.
Well, it's half the story.
It is. It's half the story and shit, but also, like, I was also told it would be much longer. Repeatedly, I was told it would be much longer. It would be a little bit more difficult.
Okay,
I would
hang on, hang on. I was the one that told you this, or one of. I also played it on a PS4.
there were tons of people in the Steam comments who were talking about how much they loved it and how long they spent on it. And
Well, did you not
it's
love
a
it?
very I loved it. Sure, it just was short. Eh, It was really short. It was Crisis Core short.
Crisis Core was pretty long.
Crisis Core is only long if you play it long. But you know as well as I do, you can beat that game in 20 hours.
Oh, yeah, but 20 hours is still long.
But for a Final Fantasy,
Okay, you got me there. For a JRPG, just in general.
right, right. Scarlet Nexus was longer than Final Fantasy VII Remake, so that was a little disappointing.
Scarlet Nexus was so good.
It was so good. I still need to play
Oh,
through the Udo half of that game. Oh, it was so good.
so much philosophy, so much psychology, so much depth.
Some of the best hack and slash gameplay over the last fucking decade. But
Repetitive.
we're not here to talk. We're not here to suck the dick of Scarlet Nexus. We're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII.
I quite enjoyed Final Fantasy VII. I made the decision to play the PS1 version of Final Fantasy VII beforehand. Um,
Right.
and when I finally and I played the remake on the PS4. I haven't played Intergrade. I have heard there's more stuff in Intergrade. I don't know. But I like both. I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake. However, I know you have a conflicting opinion about the PS1 version.
I don't like Final Fantasy as a series. I think as a series collectively, it has had more bad than it has good, but there are a few really standout titles. And Final Fantasy VII is not fucking one of them. I don't know what everybody's big deal about the game is, but it takes 4 hours to get into. It's incredibly long and drawn out throughout the story. There's no emotional attachment to the characters you're supposed to give a shit about. And then everybody actually important dies. And it's still not emotional for you. So, I wasn't a big fan of Final Fantasy VII originally, but I am a huge fan of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think the story is better. I think the visuals are outstanding, far beyond that of anything else in the series. I think the music is good, the gameplay is good, the characters are all actually drawn in to be characters, and they're not just shoehorned pieces of lore for the world to exist. It feels so much better than the original in so many ways.
See,
Sorry, I just had to let that
no,
out.
hey, I mean, you're grabbing people's attention, right? Like now
I
people want to
hate Final
know.
Fantasy. I really do.
I, I see. I'm kind of on the fence with Final Fantasy. I think there are quite a few Final Fantasy games that I think are really good, but in their own lens, like if you
See,
just look at Final Fantasy compared to Final Fantasy, there are good Final Fantasy games. But the second you deviate and you look at like other games, a lot of Final Fantasy isn't all that good.
I'm a fan of the Final Fantasies that aren't JRPGs. The ones like Crisis Core or Crystal Chronicles or literally any Final Fantasy that wasn't a Type 0, which is kind of a JRPG but more so an action RPG.
Yeah, Type Zero was
The
pretty good.
Dirge of Cerberus, one of the best third-person shooters on the PlayStation 2, visually one of the best looking games on the PlayStation 2.
I mean, best shooter. I mean, Dead to Rights was really good.
Yeah, yeah, Dead to
Max
Rights is
Payne,
incredible. Killzone for the time.
Killzone. I mean, there was
Lots of really good
yeah, there
good
were a
looking
lot
games,
of
but
good games on the PS2. Let's be
Dirge of
real.
Cerberus had a lot of great physics, big world, a lot of shit rendered on screen. They took out the fog. I mean, it was the first of its kind, and it was also the last of its kind.
True.
But Final Fantasy as an overall series, the JRPGs, the turn-based JRPGs as they stand, are inferior to other JRPGs. That is objective. They're not even turn-based. You can still get hit by your enemy even though you're not ready for your turn.
I mean,
They're supposed to be faster than that. I get it, but how are they supposed to be faster than that when you can play through the majority of Final Fantasy games using the exact same attack?
I don't think turn-based combat is what is a qualifier anymore. I think they called it like RJPGs or something like that, like real-time JRPGs. I think they've kind of created their own subcategory.
It was a cooldown JRPG where you had to wait a period of time to do something in a game that already took fucking forever.
Right. What about
Intergrade is great.
Lightning? Was Lightning turn-based?
Lightning Returns was like sort of action RPG, but there's a lot of the turn-based. It's that transition from Final Fantasy into Final Fantasy 15. Which I hate that one too, for a slew of other reasons.
We'll get into that.
Right.
Let's try to stay on topic. We're talking about a genre, and then we'll move into the next topic.
As far as JRPGs goes, just play Megami Tensei. Any of them. I just got Nocturne. I'm about to play through that again. One of the hardest JRPGs on the planet, and it's actually worth playing. Persona's coming to Game Pass. Played those as JRPGs.
Right.
Final Fantasy Intergrade is a good hack and slash game. A good action RPG in the same vein as something like Kingdom Hearts.
So
it's fun.
My first experience with Final Fantasy VII versus the remake was kind of like how I felt when God of War for the PS4 came out. It just didn't feel like God of War to me anymore. And I understand that was kind of the point. Like they were making a point with
God
of that.
War. With God of War, it's 6 games and they had to do something different.
Right. Yeah, but that isn't a fair argument because how many Final Fantasy games are there?
Right. And none of them did anything. Then that's why I hate them so much. That is a fair argument to me. Ultimately, my biggest problem with Final Fantasy is repetition. The story is about nothing. If you really pay attention to a lot of the Final Fantasy games, there is no story to most of them. So that doesn't even matter. Any overworking overworld lore that they've built up over the years through all of their shit is side panel to the rest of what is ultimately a boring experience, which is where the action RPGs like Crisis Core and Crystal Chronicles come in. They had a lot of interactability, fun. Their stories made sense. Final Fantasy VII has an amazing story, but it didn't originally. Right. Like, I hate to be that guy. It wasn't as good to me as it was to everybody else.
But I agree with you. How old were you when Final Fantasy VII came out?
I wasn't even born yet. Yeah, the first time I played it, I was like 7. But that's not. Those aren't my more recent experience. Final Fantasy VII was on Game Pass not that long ago, and I tried. I fucking tried. But 2 hours in and still bored, I was like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's not worth me wasting my time to get to something that might be good.
Can I transition, because this is definitely a conversation that's more about you, which I appreciate, because I like when you get excited over this kind of stuff. We don't very often hear from you in this term. What about like Earthbound and Mother series and other JRPGs that are generally
like Chrono
considered
Trigger?
classic?
Square themselves did a better job at JRPGs. Play fucking Chrono Trigger or Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana is an action RPG, but it's still a better JRPG than any of the Final Fantasy games. Plays the Tales games. The Tales games are awesome. Tales of Arise just came out.
So good, yeah. I mean, even Ni no Kunai, I would even recommend.
Right. Bravely Default, another one from the mouths of Square, who did Final Fantasy, a better JRPG than their flagship series.
Octopath Traveler?
Octopath Traveler is fucking Project Triangle Strategy is brand new.
Yeah.
There are more options for JRPG out there, which is why I think the Final Fantasy VII remake works so well.
I just recently did Fire Emblem. So good. So good. I had
Fire Emblem
so much fun.
Strategy RPGs don't get enough love in the JRPG space.
True.
Grandia,
yeah. Grandia crossovers with Final Fantasy quite often, doesn't it?
Yep.
Another one of those Kingdom Hearts situations.
Very good. in and of their own right. I don't know how Square managed to fuck up their flagship ship series so much, and I don't know why everybody's so gaga over it. Because in reality, if you look at Final Fantasy, it's fucking dumb.
I've always been in like a different camp where I've said it's okay to call something Final Fantasy, but it should never be the head of the project. Like Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X2 could have just been, you know, from the creators of Final Fantasy, we bring you, and then the title, or a Final Fantasy story, the title of the game. That way you can look at it as,
Can I just be the one guy in the room to talk about how fucking stupid it is to give a sequel a sequel?
okay, well, yeah. And that's that's what I'm getting to is like Final Fantasy does not need to be Final Fantasy, and I've said this before. Final Fantasy X didn't need to be Final Fantasy. It could have been its own thing. But they knew if they put Final Fantasy on it, it would sell.
I really want to play Stranger of Paradise, despite the Final Fantasy name being tacked onto it. I really want to play Stranger of Paradise because I've heard good
Well,
things.
Stranger of Paradise is Final Fantasy 1.
Origins.
Yeah.
Right. Very, very Final Fantasy related. Still probably a better Final Fantasy than any of the actual mainline series games.
But here's the problem, and this is what I'm saying. You're saying Final Fantasy. What does that mean?
Nothing. It means literally nothing. There is no continuity to Final Fantasy, so it absolutely means nothing.
And
The continuity is Chocobos and Sid.
I'm sure there's, well, that's kind of like Dark Souls and what's it, patches, right? But I mean, Dark Souls actually has lore that connects each other, so I guess.
I hate to. I'm shitting on them a little bit harshly. If you pay attention, there is some Final Fantasy lore that makes sense. There are time periods throughout Final Fantasy's timeline that do keep a consistent timeline, but overall, none of their stories are related.
And again,
They all
that's
take
what I'm
place in the same
saying.
world. None of their stories are related, and I agree with you. They just shouldn't have the Final Fantasy title, but they do because it's a selling point.
It is. It's 100%. This is Final Fantasy X-2. It's like, why can't it just be subtitled Final Fantasy and give it a real name? I would be way more interested in Square's games if I knew there's just little things that are connecting this lore, but it's its own story.
I used to make the joke that Kingdom Hearts was the best Final Fantasy.
It's not. There is no greatest Final Fantasy in my opinion. They're all
Crisis Core is the best Final Fantasy.
See, that brings a problem into the question though, because if I'm gonna respect Crisis Core, which I do put pretty highly, and I praise pretty highly for it being on the PSP and everything, I also have to then put it into the lens in this conversation of Final Fantasy VII.
I don't think, and I'm gonna just, this is where my opinion's kind of gone. I don't think Final Fantasy VII needed to be a Final Fantasy, just like other games didn't need to be Final Fantasy. Oh. Final Fantasy VII, the story of Midgar itself is engaging enough to be its own separate entity.
You literally could have just given it the subtitle FF and then : Midgar. And I would have been like, this looks sick.
Right.
And I wouldn't need to know what FF stands for.
And all of the sequels that came for it and the side games would have actually been fucking much more intertwined with their base property. They wouldn't be related back to totally unrelated things.
And it could be unrelated in that regard because people would be like, the FF doesn't matter. Just play the game for what it is. Right.
That's the same thing with Silent Hill, right? Like Downpour didn't need to be Silent Hill.
Exactly. It's just using a selling point name.
Right. It was a decent mediocre game. It didn't need to be Silent Hill. It would have probably been better to just be Downpour by itself in the world of Silent Hill. It didn't. You could still make it in Silent Hill if you wanted without the fucking name of the game being that. It didn't even need to exist in that same canonicity, but it does. And with Final Fantasy, like you create a mainline series like that, you create a canonicity. But none of the stories about it actually matter when you're ripping apart the universe and time all the fucking time.
Exactly.
There's no timeline.
And that's one of the reasons why I highly respect Resident Evil, is because, and this is my perspective, I know a lot of people aren't going to share this perspective. Every time I play Resident Evil, I play 1 through 8. It always...
They don't matter.
they all matter. They all connect in their own unique way, but they always seem like there's this invisible narrator, and he has like a red string table, and he's got all the documents laid out before him, and he's reiterating a tale that happened a long time ago, and he's trying to put all the pieces together. And then you, as the player, you get these tidbits of lore throughout this world and what happened. And but it all puts, there's a conspiracy, there's like a complot that you can actually put together and have a narrative because it works.
Right. And I think that's kind of the direction they took with the newer Resident Evil remakes, is instead of it being the inner working conspiracy and the narrator pulling the strings, they're kind of recounting what would be the actual events.
Right.
That's their take on it now.
Like we're getting into like this more modern time where these games are going to string together a lot cleaner. I don't know.
And
I appreciate
the
that.
old games will make sense with the new games in
Mhm.
their own way, and that's great. Final Fantasy just doesn't have to. We could spend hundreds of hours talking about the thousands of hours of Final Fantasy story there is,
Not really.
which is unfortunate.
Mm. Because like I could sit here and I can break down Integrate into every single portion of the game, its highs, its lows. But at the end of the day, it's only half of a single game, and it itself
It's not even.
is
It's not
7.
even Final Fantasy VII. I mean, I got to be the first guy to say Final Fantasy VII Intergrade is the most Final Fantasy VII you're going to see come out of this series, because Rebirth is not going to be the second half of Final Fantasy
Oh,
VII.
no way.
It's going to be a brand new game. It's entirely brand new experience. Even Crisis Core Remake is going to change itself
Which
to
was
accommodate the
canceled.
new story they're telling.
It was canceled.
No, it wasn't.
Square Enix abandoned FF7 Crisis Core to the PSP, so these fans are recreating it. It was canceled.
6 hours. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion pre-orders are live at Amazon from GameSpot.
What? So they canceled it just to bring it back?
Yeah, it's still going. It was announced with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
No shot.
I'm very excited. They have story to tell here. I really want to see what Crisis Core does. I want to see what Rebirth does. And I want to see them remake Dirge of Cerberus using all of the brand new story that they're putting together. Keep it in line with that. Give Final Fantasy its own world. And this collection of games, this brand new collection of Final Fantasy VII Remake games, should be taken as their own unique property.
Oh, it's called Reunion. What?
Yep, we are in fact getting Crisis Core Reunion.
Not on PC, go figure.
It's coming to PC. It's coming to
PS5,
consoles
PS4
first, but it's coming to PC.
later on. Oh, that's
Yeah.
huge. I'm excited to check that out. I might replay that on the stream. Look forward to that.
I'm definitely replaying Crisis Core. That's my favorite Final Fantasy in the entire series.
It is easily one of the best ones. You want to know what I really like about Crisis Core?
It was good.
I can refer to it as Crisis Core.
Right. It's its own property.
Exactly.
Dirge of Cerberus. I mentioned that. I don't even have to say Final Fantasy, and it just is.
Yeah, because Dirge of Cerberus is very clear what it is. And what I like, this is hard for me because I don't like it, but I like it at the same time. Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, and there's a couple other ones if I'm not mistaken.
Crystal
that like
Chronicles
hang on. All of those games connect into Final Fantasy VII. And I feel like, again, it didn't need to be Final Fantasy VII. There was a whole anthology here that had nothing to do with Final Fantasy.
Right. If you look at Crisis Core is not a game about Cloud and his Final Fantasy endeavors in Midgar. It is a game about Zack and his time spent in Midgar in Soldier. And Crisis Core just by itself is a really good name for that story.
Exactly.
Dirge of Cerberus has fucking nothing to do with Final Fantasy VII.
Well,
It's a sequel to the entire story. It's after Advent Children. Like,
the only thing that Dirge of Cerberus has to do with Final Fantasy VII is it's a character from Final Fantasy VII. It's that world.
right. It's Midgar post Advent Children, and that's it.
And they don't call that Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus, right?
It's Dirge of Cerberus, subtitled Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, that is so much better.
Isn't it?
That is so much
It's much
better.
more charming.
Because then it's like, okay, this takes place in the Final Fantasy VII universe. You can understand where it's being located, but it is Dirge of Cerberus.
That's why I want to play Stranger of Paradise so much, because I know that it's subtitled a Final Fantasy game, but in reality, they're putting so much focus on the idea that it is its own property.
I own that game too. You want to? Here's my problem. I bought Stranger of Paradise, in Paradise, whatever. I can't launch it. It doesn't work.
That's sad.
And it still doesn't work to this day.
I wonder if fucking Square does that, like, if it's a hardware thing or if Square just like didn't release good PC ports of their games. Yeah,
Hardware.
because these games are designed for consoles, they're not designed for PC.
It shouldn't matter. You know
It
what
does matter.
computer I have.
Even now, though, you know that games that are developed for console first and get ported to PC are always inferior.
True.
Always, no matter how much better consoles get, we always end up with Final Fantasy VII Intergrade will stutter on your computer. And that's not because your hardware can't handle it, it's because of the incompatibilities. It's because it's designed to run on a PlayStation 4 and 5.
That makes me so mad because you know what my computer is.
Right.
Like, the fact that I can't run these games or properly is bullshit.
Right. Even the Kingdom Hearts 1+2 and 1+2 collection still has that same problem. Tons of performance issues where they shouldn't exist because they're ports of console games. Even though emulators can do Kingdom Hearts better, the ports for the PC are just bad.
Yeah, I have a lot of people don't know this, but 6 actually had a remake and they actually cut their advertising because it was just running so bad.
Final Fantasy VIII Remastered is one of the worst performing PC games on the planet, and it's from 1999.
Seriously. Yeah, that's a real thing. And they ported it over to the Switch too.
Yep. And it doesn't work on the Switch either. It doesn't work anywhere except for the PlayStation. The consoles that it was developed for or what it works on.
But here's my other question. Final Fantasy VIII, Tifa makes an appearance, but it's not Tifa, it's Rinoa. Did they just asset flip?
Final Fantasy VIII is a hallucination. It's a ton of hallucination. There is no story there. If you play it and you pay attention to it, you know that
No, I
most
know
of
that.
it happens during a coma sequence.
Yeah, I know all that.
And if you know anything about Final Fantasy, being in that coma sequence just puts them into the life tree, and souls effectively take on multiple people. So it is Tifa, but it's also the other chick. It's just a very strange, like how the life tree works thing.
I understand how all of that works. That's not the question. I just couldn't believe that they asset flipped.
It is an asset flip, 100%. If you've ever played through any of the PS1 Final Fantasy games, like back to back, you can tell just how much shit they flipped. They actually flipped an asset from Final Fantasy IX for Kingdom Hearts 2.
Seriously?
Yeah.
You want to get on to the good stuff? Because we can talk about the bad stuff all day.
The good stuff is the gameplay. Holy shit. It is so good. The weapons are good. The customization is good. All of the swords feel good. Switching characters is bomb as shit. Party members all have awesome abilities. Every good ability from Final Fantasy makes a return. Some iconic ones. If you've ever played Kingdom Hearts and you've never played Final Fantasy, some really iconic ones like the Braver make a return. Stuff that is familiar to players will be here, even though it's its own brand new experience. And it feels so good to play.
I have a question for you.
Hmm.
Now, you played Intergrade. I played the remake on the PS4. Did Vincent
Right.
Valentine make an appearance?
No.
Okay.
I haven't played through the Yuffie stuff yet. I haven't actually played Intergrade. I played the main story.
Okay.
So there's still some stuff for me to get through.
Interesting. Okay, no spoilers then, because I'm thinking he might make an appearance, which...
It would be with the Yuffie stuff.
The only thing well, yeah. Because I know in the in the catacomb. Is it the catacombs? Is that what it is? It's like you go down the spiral staircase into the basement, and they have like the catacomb section. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
And
You
he's
know what's
sleeping in the
amazing about
coffin.
this whole character to me is funny because a secret character that's totally optional got a mainline spin-off of his own that's better than a lot of the other mainline Final Fantasy games.
True. My tab just crashed. What is happening? I should probably just clarify for the audience. I just upgraded my computer. I went from Ryzen 5800X to LGA 1600 or 1700, whatever the fuck they're calling it. Intel's 12700K, and it is awful. Awful.
It'd be crashing a lot. It do be like that
It is
sometimes.
an awful experience. I want to get rid of it so bad. And it's been 2 days. Anyway.
Sponsored by Intel. Not really.
No.
No.
They can go
No,
ahead
Intel,
and
don't
release their
sponsor
Alchemist.
us.
I don't want
Yeah,
anything to do with you. No. Could you imagine me trying to do a press meeting for Intel? I'd be like,
I couldn't. I couldn't.
I mean, yeah, it hit 5.2 gigahertz for 2 minutes, and now I'm stuck at 4.6, and it's crashing because of memory overlapping. Thanks.
We have the second smallest nanometer processing nodes on the market, next to our only competitor.
Got him. Okay. So what was your favorite part of Intergrade?
Dropping the plate, climbing the plate before it drops, and then climbing the plate after it's dropped, dropping the plate. That whole section is so well done. There's so much visual detail, the gameplay, the enemies. Like, that's when the game really fucking shines at you and tells you, we are taking this as serious. This is why it took so many years to get out.
Right.
You get to see the entirety of Midgar from overhead, and there's so much detail in the world, and there's so many visuals going on while you've got this super fluid combat happening, and this really great dialogue about the characters wondering if it's their fault or wondering who to blame. Just, that there's a sense of personability to the characters in the moment. The gameplay, the gameplay against the enemies of Shinra, right? Elite soldiers, their robots, things like that. They can get repetitive if they don't change them up. But they did. They changed them up so often that it never felt boring to fight things from Shinra.
Right. I agree. I completely agree. That's not my favorite part, though. My favorite part is the scene where you go into the mountains.
That's
It's not mountains. It would be the underground, wouldn't it?
yeah, it would be the underground.
What am I confusing this with?
You're confusing this with the original. You don't ever leave the wall in Final Fantasy VII Intergrade.
Oh,
You're almost on point. They do make it to the mountain eventually, but you don't leave the wall in Intergrade.
what am I thinking? I'm thinking of the Mako reactor. That's what I'm thinking of. When they like go into the bottom and you have to like make your way with Sephiroth, and he's like walking ahead of you slowly.
Oh,
And he's like
yeah.
dictating you. I loved seeing that dynamic in the characters.
Chasing Dr. Hojo.
That too. Like it was so much intensity, and I love that Square Enix had the foresight to like create little puzzles and little extra details while you were waiting for things to do. And it like gives you this like sense of urgency, but at the same time, like it's still a video game.
Man, Dr. Hojo reminds me of the perfect Resident Evil villain. People are trying to actively kill him. His lab is getting destroyed, and in the midst of all of it, he, being the villain he is still focused on making the protagonist fight things just for combat data to sell.
Right.
He's the perfect Resident Evil villain.
Isn't it like you run into the room and he just turns and he's like, "Oh, it's you," and then he like laughs and just goes back to work, and he's like, "What are you gonna do? Kill me?"
Doesn't even give a shit that he's being attacked by multiple people, and one of them is a soldier.
Right.
he's totally fine with that.
Wild. I love the character development in that regard. Like, what Final Fantasy Remake taught me was if they can do anything, it's create characters. They
Right.
do it so well. Zack is absolutely incredible. Aerith, better, I guess. Still not great.
She's become kind of like a notice me senpai.
Yes. She was simping for Cloud hardcore.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I like that dynamicism as well. Flipping the roles, and Cloud is this tough, not really emotionally savvy soldier. Like, I like that, having that down to earth girl. Like, that was
I
fun.
take it back. My favorite part of the game is hand massage because of how fucking utterly uncomfortable the whole time is.
Barrett does a good job with in Japan, hand massages are normal though, aren't they?
Right. It's just how they play it out on screen that makes it really fucked up.
Got you.
Well, the whole of Wall Market was done beautifully. Great
Yes.
spot. I missed the hole. The hole should have made a return. There was nothing in it, but it should have been there. But other than that, Wall Market was perfect.
I liked the first scene where you're following Aerith back to her house and you're trying to sneak out. That was fun. Seeing her house for the first time and meeting her mom for the first time, seeing that flower bed was very cool. I liked seeing all of that. It was such a dichotomy from the rest of the game, and it said a lot about Aerith and the
The
psychology of
foreshadowing.
that and the
The foreshadowing,
foreshadowing. Yeah,
seeing her talk to the flowers and giving you all the little hints that she's an ancient throughout
right.
the thing. It's just spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't played a 20-year-old game, a 22-year-old game, Aerith was an ancient. Fucking, if you don't know what that means, play Crystal Chronicles.
They like you had these complaints in the beginning of the podcast about Final Fantasy VII on PS1, and I would argue 90% of them were fixed with this remake.
Yep. Every single problem I had with Final Fantasy VII Remake was gone. I was hooked in the first few minutes. I actually wanted to keep playing. The characters were good. The combat felt good. I didn't feel like I was just wasting my time slogging through what were pretty visuals for the 90s.
Hmm.
And even then, I saw better pre-rendered stuff. Like, they were complex, but they weren't the best looking things.
I want to do a playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Original on the channel. But every time I think about doing it, I remember that my first time through it took 230 hours. And
It's
I'm like,
fucking long. It's not worth it.
And even when I go and because obviously I'm going to be doing a remake series once the next part of it drops, which I don't think this is going to be a 1-2 drop. I think this is going to be a 1-2-3-4 drop. We'll get to that. That's still going to take me forever because I'm going to want to show everything. I'm going to want to experience everything. I'm going to do everything I didn't do on my PS4 release because I hated playing on the PS4. It was horrible.
Right.
Again, if anybody tries to tell me console is better, you are just wrong.
The only classic Final Fantasy worth playing today, I stand by Final Fantasy VI.
Oh, yeah.
For what it did, for what it is, for how fun it is, for how quick the game goes. 50, 60 hours at maximum. Good character development, great world building, a lot of really impressive shit for the Super Nintendo, some great soundtrack going. That is the only good classic Final Fantasy.
Don't forget, 6 is the only one I own sealed.
Right.
It's that good.
It came out as Final Fantasy 3
that's a
in
lie.
America.
I have Final Fantasy Lightning Returns still sealed, and I have Final Fantasy 15 sealed.
Final Hallway 13 was really bad.
I don't even know what Final Fantasy 13 is.
It's a game about sisters and the power of sisterhood, and it's Frozen.
Oh.
It's Frozen. It's Frozen with Final Fantasy summons.
That's okay, that's Lightning Returns. Got you.
Right.
I've heard good things though. Like I remember back in the day when that came out, a bunch of my friends, well, they were hardcore into Final Fantasy, so
you can beat Final Fantasy 13 and 13 too by holding down the auto battle button. You run forward and hold down the auto battle button, and the whole game plays out.
Interesting. That's what happened with 15.
Yeah, right. You just fucking hold down the combat button, and the whole game plays itself. Why would you even do anything? Most of it is going one direction while you wait to get to a fight where you do nothing.
Interesting.
Like, how is that appealing? In Final Fantasy VII, it was more like Kingdom Hearts. There were swarms of shit coming at me all the time. There was stuff popping up, groups of stuff, and there was always something worth fighting if I wanted to fight. That was what made the world and the inner workings of Scrapyard and inside Midgar things and the underground vault and the sewers. So many interesting places full of enemies worth fighting.
War of the Visions Final Fantasy Brave Exvius?
What the fuck did you just say?
I have no idea what any of this is. There are games from the Final Fantasy franchise that I've never heard of. Like, I've never even seen this stuff.
2019 mobile game, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius.
War of the Visions, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, Final Fantasy Tactics collaboration. It's the same game! How are you collaborating if they're both Final Fantasy?
Right, right. It's the exact fucking Final Fantasy. Oh, dude, Final Fantasy All the Bravest. One of their first mobile game attempts was so bad. You had to wait hours for your characters to respawn if you died in battle, and it was tap hundreds of sprites to have them do one attack until they died, and you waited more time or paid extra money for more dudes.
I found a
Honestly,
no shit.
NFTs.
I'm just give me one moment here. I found a literal page called Final Fantasy Games You've Never Heard of. It's a legitimate thing in the Final Fantasy community to introduce them to games they've probably never heard of.
Fucking crazy.
Let's see.
How do you make 50 Final Fantasies?
Fantasy Dimensions. Never heard of that. Fantasy Adventures. Vagrant Story. I know about Vagrant Story. Final Fantasy Legends.
My Life as a King.
Final Fantasy Explorers. Like Crisis
Worse
Core.
than
What?
Sims.
No, everybody knows. How do you not know what Crisis Core is? How is that number 7 on this list?
That is a very obscure game, actually, believe it or not. Not a lot of people
How?
have played Crisis Core because the PSP didn't explode like that.
I thought it was one of the best sellers in the world.
I don't think so.
You are correct. 21 million sold.
Yeah, it
81.9 overall, though.
It was a great console. People loved it. It just wasn't a great seller. And Crisis Core definitely wasn't a great seller here in the West.
No, it wasn't. Which is so sad because it's the best one.
Yeah, it is. It is the best one.
I just keep coming back to the same complaint. I am sick and tired of every single Final Fantasy game being called Final Fantasy when it's not. That's it.
Right.
I just keep coming back to that. I can't handle it. I hate it. It's so annoying.
Square, if you're listening, give your games other fucking titles. Don't be Call of Duty. Don't be Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Stop that shit. We don't need it to be Black Ops to also be Cold War. We don't need it to be Final Fantasy to just be a story about Cloud and Midgar. What the fuck is the matter with you guys?
Call of Duty, Final Fantasy, the Call of Midgar.
All of Final Cold Fantasy War Black Ops 7 Crisis Core.
It's the third title. I just can't help but constantly bring that up because it is my number one pet peeve with the franchise. I'm okay with them doing like anthology RPGs and JRPGs. That's fine. But I don't feel that Final Fantasy VII needed to be Final Fantasy. It could have just been integrate a Final Fantasy story.
Integrate a Final Fantasy Kingdom Hearts story.
In space. With Markiplier.
Yeah, In Space with Go watch In Space with Markiplier, audience.
Oh my god, it's so good. You finally watched it?
I did. I love Markiplier's choose your own adventure things. So
I don't want to spoil that.
Markiplier was so good. In Space was good. If you haven't seen them, go watch them. They're awesome.
Who was your favorite actor in Space with Markiplier?
Mark himself is a way better actor than I thought he would be.
Oh, he's incredible.
Right.
And he does the comedy so well. Mine's MatPat. I thought MatPat's role was incredible. He played it so well.
Yeah, but MatPat's a natural born showman. He could play P.T. Barnum and do a damn good job, and he's not even a dickhead.
I don't know. I just felt like MatPat. I just like MatPat. I think that's the end of it. I just like MatPat.
Yeah, I just like MatPat.
Him and his wife are just awesome. I want to be their friends. I want to go to their house.
It's just a theory. Your mom theory. Thanks for watching.
Damn. Check these out. Gives you like the circle hand, the okay hand.
It's my 10th final theory for Five Nights at Freddy's, guys.
My 6th night at Freddy's. How did I make it? Man, we're off topic big time. There is no topic with this game, and that's the problem. It's like we could
The
talk.
real topic is it's fun. It's just like talking about Kingdom Hearts. How do you talk about it other than it's fun? There's a level of fun that comes with Intergrade that the rest of the series doesn't. Fuck the rest of the series. Intergrade by itself as a game is just fun.
There are worthwhile Final Fantasy games to play. I mean, we already talked about Crisis Core. We have a whole podcast on Crisis Core.
We got to talk about Crystal Chronicles.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we plan on playing Crystal Chronicles. Like, there are worthwhile Final Fantasy experiences, but at the end of the day, I just can't get past the titling. Like, that is my problem. I cannot get past it. I'm so stuck on that.
So what would you rate Intergrade? Or what would you rate Final Fantasy VII Remake after the fact?
After the fact, 7 out of 10.
Easily.
I
agree.
Like, the graphics were there. The flow was all there. The music was there. The character design was there. The better audio, the better voice acting. It was less cheesy. It was a little bit more streamlined.
Cloud in a dress.
Yeah, they did that. That was fun. They weren't afraid to push some of the boundaries that made their older titles whatever.
Good. They kept their same level of this is what the story is, and we're not going to change it.
Right.
Like, we are going to change it, but we're not going to change fundamentally who these characters are, how they behave, and how they react with each other.
It would be really difficult to change Cloud because Crisis Core sets up Cloud very well.
Right.
And I know there are a lot of theories of if Zack is in Cloud and all of that stuff. And
my current working theory for Final Fantasy VII Remake is that Zack never died. Cloud never took Zack's memories. The thing that's happening to him is actually cell degradation from the Mako.
Oh, that's an interesting.
Right, because like they have pretty heavily hinted at Zack surviving that last clash with the Shinra guys and carrying Cloud out, which doesn't happen.
Interesting.
It's very small detail, minute. I'm excited for Rebirth. I can't wait to see it.
Because I've heard all kinds of stuff. Like, Zack does die, but Zack's Mako life stream goes into Cloud, and Cloud defends Zack's corpse, and then
in the original Final Fantasy VII, that would be kind of how it goes down. Ultimately, like, Zack dies in combat at the end of combat when they take out everybody from Shinra's already fucked up when Zack dies.
Right.
He dies. Cloud's Mako and his Mako have this strange reaction with each other, whereas Lifestream doesn't make it to the planet. It literally makes it to Cloud.
It is interesting. Like, there is potential to rewrite the story here. And if it's done well and it fits into, because if they're doing Crisis Core, they're obviously doing some edits and revisions to the story.
Right. And they've kept a bunch of other characters alive. So to see Zack, is probably one of a comeback character is not something I'm going to be too surprised about if that happens.
I think he should stay dead.
I think he has to die. Like, Aerith has to die for the story to make sense in the original Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
In the original story, he has to die for it to make sense. But that's what Intergrade and Rebirth are about. They're about changing the story because things didn't go according to destiny. People died when they weren't supposed to, and Destiny had other plans, but Sephiroth kind of fucked up Destiny.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm excited to see what they do. I'm not holding out a lot of faith because Again, they're
I
gonna
think
tagline it a Final Fantasy. I don't feel like it should be Final Fantasy. It's that story all over again. I'm annoyed with that kind of shit. It's pandering. I don't like that pandering.
right. That's effectively what it's become after what Final Fantasy 16 just got announced.
Yeah,
6 fucking teen mainline entries that are all totally unrelated.
some of them are related, some of them aren't related. We have sequels to games that are.
Crystal Chronicles is more related to Final Fantasy 7 than any of the other Final Fantasy mainline games, which
And
is funny.
I know people are going to see this and they're going to be commenting, well, Final Fantasy VII is just the title. It's the subtitle and it blah blah blah. It's like, I know how it's staged. I understand the anthology aspect of it called Final Fantasy VII.
But
That's
there's
not the
nothing in the
point.
title to give it its own identity.
That's what I'm saying. It does not live on its own identity. It all blurs together into one amorphous mass that makes no sense.
Right.
What is Final Fantasy Type 0? Where does that fit in? Is it its own thing? Is it a
kind of fits in
sub-story?
with Final Fantasy Tactics, but that's a whole other can of worms that ties into like Final Fantasy 14 and 11 and 12, and the Zodiac Age in Final Fantasy's timeline is a fucking mess.
And don't forget, there's a whole game called Zodiac Age.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 12 is called the Zodiac Age. It could just be called the Zodiac Age, and it would have been a better game.
And then you have the
Because
MMO.
it didn't need Final Fantasy.
You have the MMO. And then
Right,
you
14.
also have the other one, Final Fantasy Worlds, which is a
Right.
completely different MMO, but that's more in the vein of like the chibi
There's
stuff.
There's the
like,
Battle
oh.
Royale for mobile.
And then you have the Kingdoms from Final Fantasy 15. They made the Kingdoms game, which was literally just a whatever shoehorned in typical
there was that
money hog.
really fucking bad Final Fantasy that came out on the original Nintendo. And the time when they thought the West couldn't handle 2 and 3, so they only released them in Japan, we got a game from Square that wasn't even originally called Final Fantasy, renamed to Final Fantasy here just for the selling. It was like Mystic Warriors or something. It's some really dumb shit.
I just can't
Mystic
get past
Quest. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. It was literally just called Mystic Quest in Japan. Why couldn't they just do that here? Why did it have to be Final Fantasy? It wasn't even a good game. It didn't deserve to be Final Fantasy. Why did they have to do it dirty like that?
Like people complain about like timelining The Legend of Zelda, which I get it. I'm in the same boat.
But at least there's some timeline there.
Exactly. There's speculation. I mean, with Final Fantasy, it's like, what are we grasping at? Sid? Like, that's your connection?
Sid, the Moogles, and the Chocobos. The only things that carry over. Mako, which is called something different in every single fucking game. Materia is always made of something different.
The continuity. Like, see, like, if I may speak for a moment, if you guys play something like Dark Souls, what's super interesting about Dark Souls is how it narrates its world. There is a dragon in Dark Souls 1 which they constantly refer to as a Cyclops. However, we as the player looking in can see that this dragon is not a Cyclops. It has 2 eyes and it has something in the center of its head. Because they're presenting you the information from that world. They're presenting you the information from what they can perceive. Nobody's getting close enough to this dragon to realize that this light in the center of its head is not an eye. They just think it's an eye. And that kind of storytelling is good. That is good.
Learning to tell a story with your environment makes a huge difference. Something I like about Final Fantasy VII Remake that you don't get to see in the original is all of the other sectors in Midgar from the sky.
Right.
Other sectors are affected by the actions happening in Sector 7. You're stuck between 5, 6, and 7 the entire game, but what about Sectors 1, 2, 3, and 4? They also have to take the brunt of the plate falling, the reactors exploding. There's a lot that goes into that, and you get to overlook all of that. You see there's more world out there, and your consequences are affecting not only your portion, but that part of the world is stuck in the back of your mind when you see it.
There's a good psychology in Final Fantasy VII that makes you realize that your actions might not be the best actions, which is why you can empathize with somebody like Zack. He doesn't become a terrorist. He's fighting against the corporate machine that is destroying the world directly.
Right, and he's just fighting for his morals, the morals that same corporate machine taught him to have.
Exactly. Final Fantasy VII doesn't do that. But it does. It does it in a different way. It elevates it to a level of terrorism that ruins people's lives, kills people,
right. In
does
Intergrade,
massive
when you blow up
damage.
the Mako reactor, when the plate drops, when things happen, people die. Lots of people die. Tons of fucking... There's a lot of rubble. The whole fucking city practically explodes. And you not only see this, like... You're not just hearing about it and seeing the screen shake and seeing them talk about it. You're actually seeing this happen and people panic. And the world is reacting to what you as the player have just been a part of. You didn't drop the plate. Sure, that was Shinra's problem. They did that. But you can't help but wonder if it's your fault or not for blowing up the first reactor, which also had that same level of interactivity with the world. People hated it when you blew up the reactor.
It also creates a different conversation as well, because then it brings into a conversation of politics and reactionary politics and how do you react to terrorism on this scale. And they drop their own plate and they do these things that are horrible to their own people. And they create a police state, and you start to question if your decisions are just.
Right. And then everybody's put out as this who is in the right, who is in the wrong kind of. In the middle of it all, Cloud is a good protagonist because he's not a hero. He's not a villain. He's a mercenary.
Yes.
He is for hire. That's his shtick. He is a former soldier, mercenary for hire, who does grow to care about what he's fighting for eventually, sure. But in the beginning, doesn't agree with anybody. It's not about anyone's ideals or morals or anything like that. Cloud has been paid to do a job. And that's what you, the player, are doing. You are there not as the deciding factor, but to bear witness to all of these horrible things going on.
And I even add to that, like, Cloud, yes, he's a mercenary, ends up doing this big, obvious adventure, but he never really states his identity out publicly to people. He's like
never tells anyone what he wants.
Yeah, he's very to himself. He's like, oh, we're going shopping, and what does he buy? Medical equipment, swords, materia. He's always preparing for battle. That's his whole shtick. He's not buying you gifts. He has to wear this dress. He's not looking at it from a perspective of, how other people are going to identify it, and they're going to politicize it.
He's doing it because it has to be done.
It has to be done, and that's a really interesting way to narrate things like this. So there's this really interesting political undertone being conversated psychologically to people, philosophically to people, but they have to question their own moral intuitions. They have to go against what they think is right and wrong and question their actions, because there is a lot going on. But at the end of the day, you're playing a mercenary, and they do that on purpose. That's one of the things that made Zack such an interesting character as well, is because you took a moral high ground against Shinra. They are good games. That's what I'm trying to say. They are good. They're not incredible.
You totally cut out and crashed there for a second. I didn't hear a fucking word you just said.
I literally watched my voice meter drop too. And I was like, I'm just going to finish this statement because at the end of the day, I just wanted to get my point across.
It ended with, and they're not incredible, so...
I don't know, my screens are all resetting, but it's apparently still recording, so...
Yeah, it looks like it's still going.
Apparently I have an encoding overload.
Oh no, we dropped a frame.
I don't even know how that's possible. Weird. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Don't play the old Final Fantasies. Play Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a good game. You don't have to be a fan of Final Fantasy. If you're a fan of hack and slash games and you just like the thrill of beating stuff up with a sword, it's a good ass game.
It has some pretty good challenges.
Right. It's part hack and slash, part beat 'em up, part third person shooter with a lot of enemy variety and area variety and good difficulty, and there's a lot to it. Don't be don't be prepared for a super overwhelming ending because it's not even the end. But ultimately, like, definitely worth playing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. I would still recommend maybe wait until Crisis Core comes out, then pick them both up. Play
Right.
Crisis Core first.
Wait till Crisis Core comes out, play that first, then play Intergrade, and then wait till Rebirth and give that a shot. And just treat those three entities as their own thing, as their own piece of existence in the video game landscape. They deserve it.
Right. Because I feel like personally, especially if you're going to be jumping into Intergrade, I don't want to call it Final Fantasy VII. I just don't. I don't want to call it that. It needs a different subtitle. That's just how I feel. It needs to be called like Midgar or something. This
Midgar Intergrade and Midgar Rebirth.
Jump. Yeah, well, right. Jump into this. Jump into Crisis Core or Reunion. Then play Intergrade. Then play Rebirth. And just stop. Like, there's no reason to go looking for greater stories because it doesn't exist.
And then go play Megami Tensei because those actually have a story and are good JRPGs. If a JRPG is what you want, you've come to the wrong place.
Yeah. Go play Ni no Kunai 1 and 2. Awesome animated storytelling. Very fun. I mean, maybe Stranger of Paradise is good, but I don't know. It doesn't launch.
We'll find out. I'll pick it up. We'll find out. We'll figure out your launch problems at some point, and we'll get to that eventually.
But I will say I am really over the Final Fantasy hype. I'm Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah, I've had enough Final Fantasy in my life to last me the rest of my life.
I mean, Final Fantasy 15, like as a story, pretty bad. As a world, pretty bad. As a game, pretty bad. I mean, the amount of asset flipping in that game and reusing bosses and like you just get lost and it's not worth it.
Not to mention the formula. You always get the same first materia, the same first summon. It's the exact same for Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
They couldn't even, when they changed the game entirely, they couldn't even change their summons and materia. What the fuck, dude?
Yeah.
So yeah, go play Intergrade. Good game. Final Fantasy series, bad, not great games.
They are good, but they're not amazing.
Right.
Like
Very subjective. You don't have to take our word for it.
Honestly, like I played through X1 and X2. I think they're both like okay. They have some good comedy. They have some good scenes. All in all, it's a playable game. I played 8. I liked 8. I played 6. Obviously, I like 6. I haven't played Lightning Returns yet, but I do plan on playing it at some point. But I'm my expectations are so low.
My dog got nipped by a cat.
Ooh. We just need to fill 2 more minutes.
What are we playing next?
We are playing Dishonored 1.
Right. Stay tuned for that, because I don't remember it being very good, but he does.
I like it. I'm playing it again right now. I still like it.
I still need to get through it, so we'll find out if I like it.
Because you had some hot takes.
Yeah. Half of my opinion is a hot take.
Do you know why we're doing Dishonored?
No.
Do you know who made Dishonored?
Bethesda.
That's why we're doing it.
Because Bethesda?
Because Bethesda.
It just works.
I want to talk about a Bethesda game that's actually works. All right. Subscribe, everybody, if you got this far.
Don't forget to hit the bell icon and press the like button. And we were just looking at the analytics. Subscribing really would be like a huge help. Not gonna lie.
Also, if you could share, sharing would be huge because
Tell your
our
friends.
yeah
Tell your family. Tell your grandma. Maybe don't tell your grandma.
yeah
I
don't
say fuck a lot. Maybe don't tell your grandma.
well share it to your friends. That's more realistic. They're more likely to be
If
involved.
your grandma's like 60, share it with your grandma because she probably comes from a different time.
She's like, hell yeah! I want to go play some PUBG and listen to Omni Obscurium.
I hit my vape while I play Skyrim. Skyrim grandma is waiting for them to release Elder Scrolls 6 before she dies.
Skyrim Gamma was awesome. Is awesome. Is she still around?
Mhm.
I know. In sad news, what was his name? Oh my god, I've been so busy. Who just recently got in trouble with brain cancer?
The guy that Keemstar doxed, the old guy.
Yeah. What was his name?
You have it in the chat. I don't remember.
We're awful. I'm scrolling, guys. I'm scrolling. I'm scrolling so hard.
America.
Uh-oh. RS Glory and Gold. Tony Winchester.
Sad.
Yeah. He was like the grandpa of Twitch. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Please subscribe and share it. And we'll talk to you in the next one.
Thank you. And have a nice day.
Fucking gonk.